Good afternoon, sunflowers, and welcome to Good Journeys Tarot. I am Rosemary, and you're watching 78 Cards in 78 Weeks, my series in which I talk about each of the tarot cards as I am studying and drafting images for my own deck. And what started out as a personal process of discovery and exploration has turned into something that I'm very excited about and that others are anticipating as well. As always, I do have a guest with me today, but before I introduce my guest, I thought I would share what's been going on here. Some of you may have seen over on Instagram, I've started a new once a month series of lives where I'm doing storytelling, and I am going to get better at it. That's the whole purpose of doing the series. For me, everything I do online is about growing. And if it helps other people grow, then that's great too. Yesterday, I told a story about a fairy in the dark wood using the Mystic Fairy Tarot and the Darkwood Tarot. And next month, we will tell another story with a deck or two. And if you have ideas for a theme or decks that you'd like to see me do, please let me know. And feel free to hop on over to Instagram after this broadcast and see what I did yesterday. All right. Let's see who we've got in our chat today. Amy from Strength Reverse has popped in. Hello, Amy. I need to message you to follow up on a conversation we had. And Jennifer Ball is here. Thank you for all of your input on the cards in the Good Journeys into Tarot Facebook group. So if you guys aren't members of that group, please do join so you can comment on the cards and the process as we complete it, as well as working on the guidebook this summer. Let's see. So not a lot has been going on here other than keeping things moving. We have 5 cards left after today, one from each of the elements and one from the major arcana. So it will be very interesting to see which one's going to be our last card. I'm very excited that we're getting so close. Have a lot of exciting guests coming up. But first, today's guest, I am actually very excited to have as we talk about this particular card, and I'll explain in just a moment. Our guest today is Avory Faucette. Welcome, Avory.
Hello, everyone.
And one of the reasons I'm excited to have you here is because you actually shared in at Newt's a class on inclusive relationships readings, right? And you have a free giveaway for people today related to that same topic. One of the things about our card today, which is the Knight of Pentacles, I forgot to mention that earlier, is that it's quite different than the other knights in the cards. In fact, Jodorowsky in The Way of Tarot says that, unlike the other very masculine knights in the Marseille, that this one is more androgynous. There's a possibility that it's not a man, but might be a woman, or maybe someone who is neither. Which I thought was very interesting. And since we're talking about the topic of gender a bit, let's talk about pronouns. And I'm going to make you big real quick so that people can see your pronouns.
Okay.
And will, because it's for some reason it doesn't show them. Like on mine, I have she, her, and whoops, let me do it this way. The other way.
And flip. Oh, there I am. Yes. Oh, no. There I am.
I can't get it to do what I wanted to do, but I wanted to show your pronouns, but it won't do that for me. So share your pronouns with us.
No, it's cool. I can spell them since they may not be able to see them. So my pronouns are Z and here. I actually I came out as non-binary in 2010, I think, before they them had really fully caught on and more people were using what they call neo pronouns. But yeah, it's Z in here, spelled Z-I-E-H-I-R, and it's you would use them in a sentence as this is Avory. Z is my friend. I like it when Z reads your tarot cards. So there you go.
Good, very good. And I'm glad because that I had you on today because this is a topic that has come up several times in my channel of gender and in the tarot specifically. Benabel Wynn and I had a conversation about it. And it's something I think about a lot when I look at the court cards, which historically are very gendered. and different decks approach it differently. So I thought I'd talk a second about how I've approached it. The way that the cards are in my deck, they're silhouettes because I can't create the imagery that I want. So I decided that would be the easiest way to make them all look similar. And so as silhouettes, really, they could be anyone presenting in whatever fashion, which I kind of like. But with my quartz, I've been very intentional to try to balance the gender energy by, I made my water and earth, night and page, more feminine, whereas I made my air and my fire more masculine leaning, at least in theory. In practice, they're the silhouettes, and you could picture them however you wanted. Um, how do you feel about the cards when you're looking at them? As far
well, that's an interesting way of doing it. To my mind, as an astrologer, that pings to me, because in traditional astrology, air and fire are masculine, and earth and water are feminine. Makes sense to me. But yeah, I would say so. In general, one thing that I guess is a little different about how I read court cards is that I don't read them as people, like, ever. So when I pull a court card, I'm always reading it as an invitation for me to take on the energy of that card, or for that energy to show up somewhere, not necessarily like someone is going to come into the situation. So that is one thing that kind of like takes a little bit of the people element out of it. But yeah, when it comes to the visual of the cards, I mean, I think I like it when decks do approach it by either trying to do a mix of gender presentations, trying to do something where, like you said, like silhouette, something where it is a little more ambiguous. That's always fun. Sometimes you see like renames. All of those are good things, in my opinion. I also, though, don't necessarily mind if, for example, you have a feminine looking queen and a masculine looking king. I mind that a little less than some people, I think, because I just don't necessarily read those energies as having to do with anything essential, if that makes sense. So, I really like the playing with it, but at the same time, I think it's a good like reminder that you don't necessarily know someone's gender by how they're shown. And I enjoy when some decks I've seen will have, maybe someone who you might guess is a woman who's a queen, but it's a more sort of butch presentation or a more like mask presentation. So I think that those are fun as well. I play with it. Anything with gender, I just play with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I tend to read the courts the same as you, since I don't particularly claim to be psychic, though I am not going to talk about that today. I usually read as an energy, right, for myself or my client that is coming through, rather than say as a person. I think it more oftentimes comes up when you are reading as a fortune teller or psychic as an actual person, than say when you read for personal development and growth, the way that many of us do nowadays. So let's look at some Knight of Pentacles and how they've been presented.
I do want to say one thing about what you just said about the Jodorowsky, though, that I think is interesting, and the Knight of Pentacles being portrayed in that more androgynous way. Just like one little comment on that, because I think it is very interesting that is the Knight that is associated, and I'm sure we'll talk about this as we go, associated with like a slower movement or even a more still kind of movement than all the other Knights. Which to me is very counter to the cultural norm. I think it's very interesting that it's also the Knight that is sometimes portrayed as the most counter to the gender norm. So just a little like food for thought there for folks.
Yes, absolutely. And I actually meant to bring that up. It's another way in which this particular Knight stands out or doesn't stand out, as the case may be, is that they are typically the stationary Knight. They're not the moving or active, and they're not charismatic and like say the Knight of Cups. Even though the Knight of Cups is often portrayed as stationary, they're portrayed as a more aggressive, romantic entity, as it were. A lot of modern decks will change the horses into motorcycles, and so this is the This Might Hurt, which is quite quite a lovely deck. In fact, I'm going to be reading with it next week. It's been over a year since I've used it. I have too many decks, right? And it's not 100% clear whether it's a man or a woman, though I've always assumed it was a female in this particular deck. For some reason, it may be something I read in the guidebook. And a lot of times it is just that. It's a man on a horse or a person on a horse with their pentacle, or in this case, he's got his sack of gold in the Santa Morte. What kind of cards did you bring to share with us today?
Well, I also have a more modern. Man, this is always fun. So pardon my webcam is not like the world's best, but this is from. Come on, you can do it. Card. This is from it's called the Black Femme Tarot, right? Yes, the Black Femme Tarot. So this is just straight up gender is more femme direction, but it's also in a car. What is kind of this is so annoying, but what is kind of hard to see, you can kind of see it. A lot of the Knights of Pentacles, they're really like staring directly at their pentacle, or they're very much like contemplating their pentacle, which is something that I always notice, that I think the Knight of Pentacles has a real energy, and the Pentacles court in general has a real focus on the pentacle and like what is their work and like what are they focused on. So that was an example I had for that.
Yeah. The Slow Tarot is one of my favorites. It continues to be. And for the longest time, it was just because I love the green car and the fact that he is not driving it. He is just relaxing in the countryside after having taken his drive. But I noticed this week that he's actually tossing a coin. He's flipping a coin up in the air. And I thought that was really cool. But for some reason, this card has always really appealed to me. I don't know if it was because it had a diversity I hadn't seen in other decks, or because it was the idea of the car, the vehicle versus a motorcycle or horse. I do have a little bit of a pet peeve with the knights where they like change all the knights into motorcycles. Like we still use horses in modern society, and there's other modes of transportation, and so yeah. So but I've always loved that, and when I saw the car in your card, it immediately brought to mind.
Thought of that one. Yeah. It is funny, like when you're looking for cards for the knights, I think you tend to have a little less variety because they're always on something, right? I noticed in that card, and similarly, and this one is from the Lubanco Tarot. There, that's a little better. So I noticed in that card that the figure was kind of looking off into the sky. Similarly, I think this figure is kind of looking, it feels like they're stopping and looking at their environment. And so like, it's a little bit of a twist on the like looking at the pentacle, but I think that's an interesting sort of like stop and smell the roses vibe. I have another, and
what you were saying about the pentacle and looking at it, I think it was Rachel Pollack, I don't remember for sure, but someone was talking about this particular image and how they felt like the knight was not really focused on the pentacle, that they were holding it, but that they were kind of looking off into the direction of the future, so to speak, and planning and contemplating versus really focused on it the way that the page is.
I think that's a fair point. I tend to be not very so I definitely reference the Rider-Waite images, but I also try not to be like too sort of like, if this isn't true in the Rider-Waite, that it's not true. So like when I look at some of the more modern decks that are taking that idea, they are looking at the pinnacle, but that's a good point. That may be the original like sort of thing that a lot of those decks are taking from. It's not directly, but this is another one where with the environment, this is the Mother Tarot. And in this one, the horse is stopping to eat the grass. And then the figure is kind of looking directly out. So I both those two just make me think of this idea of like, whether it's looking at the pinnacle or just like looking at what's around you, but it has this feeling of like you are in an environment, right? It's not, you're not so focused on your journey, like maybe the Knight of Swords might be, that you totally miss everything around. So fair with the Rider-Waite, but I kind of like to like think of the Knight of Pentacles that way, that it has this element of when you're moving at a slower pace, when you're like stopping to take breaks, that you're more in tune with your environment as well.
It's interesting that you would mention environment because those were the next cards I was going to talk about as well.
Okay.
Someone even mentioned it in regard to this image this morning on a channel that I was watching. But you often see the Knight of Pentacles depicted as a farmer own a farm. Like here's the Saucer of Beto Tarot, and she actually talks about him working the land. In fact, that was one of the books that I kept out this weekend to read from because I loved her description of the Knight of Pentacles, and it really resonated with me. The knight is out working in a field under the hot sun, enjoying the work. He follows the rules, sticks to the plan, and toils on, being sure of the eventual fruits of his labor. His method is not glamorous or original, but it does work. And that actually brings to mind the other book that I had out, which was Querying the Tarot by Cassandra Snow. In it, she talks about how boring this card is for her because it is that whole process of doing the hard work, right? And for a long time, that's what's been going on here with my deck because I've trying to get through each card, and trudging on. But that idea is even brought forth in other cards in regards to the environment being like a farm. Here we see planting the pentacles for the future, slowly working the field and the light seers. And then also in the modern love, there is the depiction here of a bicycle, which is another mode of transportation that a knight could be on. But there's our horse in the background because they're on a farm. They're out in the country. They're connected with the land. And I feel like that imagery, that environment is important. And so in all of my pentacles, they're actually outdoors. The court cards are outdoors on a farm, as it might be.
Nice. Yeah. No, I like that you brought in that it's a kind of trade-off between, like, does that energy that's kind of steady and maybe kind of boring, like can be kind of boring, and then also can be important. I have a similar, actually, I pulled from, so there's a book by Meg Jones Wall. It's not out yet. I'm reading the review copy, but it comes out on the 1st. So I think it's available for pre-order. The book is called Finding the Fool. And I'm really enjoying it. And I noted in the Knight of Pentacles, the way Meg describes, part of how Meg describes this card, says, in planting a seed, we commit to a particular path of growth, declare to the earth and the rain and the sun that we intend to grow something specific. And in attending to this seed's needs, in devoting ourselves to its care, we invest in that growth, put our own love and effort into this ongoing process. And then a little later, Meg also notes about, picks back up this metaphor, and let's see where to go, and says, the challenge of the Knight of Pentacles is in recognizing where we are in a particular journey and being able to shift our perspective, resources, or efforts in order to continue progressing towards our goal. If we just keep doing something that isn't effective, we may drown or destroy our own efforts. If we keep watering a plant that's drowning, if we keep using a fertilizer that isn't actually offering the necessary nourishment, the plant will die. So I thought that was a really interesting take on, like, there is this slow, steady progress towards a goal that is often, doing the same thing every day, every week, every month, whatever. But at the same time, it's that awareness and like paying attention to what's happening. And we might need to adjust a little for different, parts of the process. I thought that was a really important thing to it. Sure. Maybe for those who find it boring.
Right, absolutely. And I think Cassandra goes on to talk about how, it is necessary to do the work so that you can end up where it is you want to be.
Yeah.
I find for myself, astrologically, I have very little earth in my birth chart. And so I tend to be focused on the goal versus the actual effort to get there. I want the quick and
Yeah.
easy. I want it to happen now. That's that
Yeah.
fire and that I have the idea.
Yeah.
I want it to happen now, and I put all of my emotions into it versus putting my time and effort.
Well,
Uh,
that's a funny comparison, Rosemary, because I'm thinking about I've been having a similar with my own work of like, okay, I just need to like do the thing. I just need to do the thing. And I have a very watery chart. I do not have a very well, I have a fair amount of fire, but it's very, very water heavy. And I noticed like that, kind of like can get lost, can get disoriented. Most of my work is with neurodivergent people and people who think they might be neurodivergent. And one of the challenges, I actually did a video on my own YouTube not too long ago about consistency and about like kind of inconsistent consistency in the way that folks, if we have like ADHD, for example, consistent effort can be this like struggle. And I think being like a watery person, I kind of relate my wateriness and my ADHD because it's this sense of like, okay, I'm just floating in the ocean, I'm going with the tides. Like I may have energy for this or energy for that, but if you try to get me to do something I don't want to do, I like cannot do it. And so trying to like reframe consistency has been a big part of like when I'm working with clients. It's just trying to be like, okay, what can consistency look like that isn't maybe like drudgery? Yeah, well, yeah.
It's the Knight of Pentacles. If you want consistency, there we go, right?
Yeah. But if you
So-
imagine like how would that night be creative? I think it's an interesting prompt,
Yeah. Absolutely.
So.
And we'll see that in a second in some cards, I think. There are some other animals that pop up, like in the Ellis deck, there are the boars that our Pentacle friends ride. And here in the Numinous Tarot, our explorer is riding a deer. There are actually tomes in this deck, this idea of knowledge being connected with the earth and with the world. And so I do love this deck, although I struggle with it because everything changes. The terminology and the suit.
Yeah, it's one of my OG favorites, but It is when I'm recommending it to other people, I'm always like, do you know tarot already? Because if you don't, then probably don't start there.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you have some other cards that you're wanting to share?
Yeah, I'll you know what I'll share. Let's see. Let's do a couple more that I would like to actually that still kind of pull a little bit on this this earth thing. So I'll just quickly show the gentle is that I like that these are named. This is the root of stones. So this is another one that renames, but I think that's interesting thinking of the knights as the root. So there's the seed, that's the page, and then the root. So back to this sort of like, this is that growth phase. Then I really wanted to show, this is probably my favorite, quote unquote, Knight of Pentacles. It is renamed. This is the Adelita of Earth from the Herb Crafters. So it's the yucca plant. And you can see this person is making a Bridget's cross. And there's a really interesting, I'll just from the guidebook. So this is coming back to that like place and earth being, place being important. If folks don't know the Herb Crafters, it's all about working with plants, and it's got like brujeria and curandera and some different kind of indigenous traditional practices incorporated in the deck. And so it notes that the figure in this is creating this Bridget's cross. She creates a bridge between her ancestors and the ancestors of the desert by weaving a Bridget's cross, a sacred symbol of her Celtic heritage. So this is presumably, a white European person who's in indigenous lands, North America, and bridging those two places together. It says the Adelita of Earth is driven by the power of place. She explores new ways to embody old traditions, using what is locally available to her without depleting resources. She knows yucca is used for weaving baskets, rope, and shoes. With the spirit of her foremothers behind her, she vows to respect the people and the medicine of her home. She explores nature's bounty and creates practical but intuitive connections with the land. She is committed to an earth-honoring spiritual path wherever she finds herself. She is in service of nature without ego. She is realistic and hardworking. So that was a lovely way to kind of bring that into the theme of this like persistence and dedication of like also bringing in the spirits of place and of land and like acknowledging what land you're on and what land you come from.
Sure. I have one here that also renames the Knight, and that is the Penumbra Tarot, and they call it the Agent of Pentacles. And obviously, but the author and artist are Australian, so they went with the kangaroo as our Knight of or Agent of Pentacles. And the Agent really makes sense to me because traditionally the knight is the one that acts on behalf of the king and or queen in the world while they stay in the castle where it's safe and secure. Another animal.
I know that they mean agent in like a more general way here, but
Right.
my brain cannot help but be like spy kangaroo. Dun, 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 dun. Like,
Oh, yeah.
It's delightful. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't decide how I feel about this one, but another animal that popped up was a snake. Here we have kind of a Medusa figure in the bone, stone, and earth flesh. Definitely, probably a more stationary action oriented person. I mean, they literally don't have to move to ensnare others. Not sure how I feel about it, although I do get the idea of a snake's being closer to the earth and that kind of earthy feeling. Jenna, do you have any thoughts on this card? I know that this is a deck that you were highly involved in when they were going through and creating it with the Facebook group, and perhaps you have some thoughts on her that I don't. I have two more cards, which I think give kind of unique takes to this particular card in the tarot. Do you have any others that you want to share first?
I can quickly show. I have two more. Might as well show them.
Okay.
One is this is Jamie Sawyer's deck, the Out of Hand Tarot. All the cards. Oh, you have it. Never mind.
Yeah, the next one.
You can talk about
Go right ahead. Talk about it.
Let's talk about it. So you can talk about that one. All right, I'm going to skip that one. I'll let you talk about it. But I'll show Fifth Spirit. I like this. Well, it will not show well enough to make this clear. But this person, if you can't see it, has a prosthetic on their right leg. And they've got their like pack full of just practical stuff. So when you're talking about different modes of transportation, I like that there's one that's hiking, like it's walking, but it's also like a very Knight of Pentacles feeling kind of walking. You know, it's like I've got my stuff, I've got my pack, I'm ready to go. And I like the disability representation, so I just want to show that. But yeah, I'll let you talk about Jamie Sawyer's card.
Oh no, go ahead. Tell us your thoughts on it as well.
And yeah, I honestly don't have a ton. I just thought it was, you know, it comes back to that sort of like persistence and dedication, discipline.
Yeah, and that was something that really, when I first saw this, I didn't understand what it was in the picture. Because obviously I've never stood on one.
I love it. I love it.
Yes, never stood on a piece of Peloton or whatever. But so there's this idea of the persistence that's necessary and that kind of dedication, which threw me at first because usually you picture this as a stationary person, which I guess it's a stationary machine, but you're pretty active on it, right? And that idea, I guess, that, you know, just because this night isn't moving doesn't mean things aren't going on.
I think that's what I do like about going beyond just the Smith Rider weight is like it's bringing in some of that, like it's not just it might be steadiness, not just stationary. So like because it's a very steady movement. It's like it's kind of boring. I mean, unless you do have, I guess, the Peloton or the ones with like the fancy. I too have not done this very often, to be clear, but I've only done the old school like. You're just riding a bike, right? Like if you have a whole screen and it might be more fancy, but the old school, it was like the same motion over and over and you're not going anywhere. So
yeah. Absolutely. And the last one is actually the Darkwood Tarot, which is this idea of patience, which comes across in this card sometimes. But this, you know, Knight is actually offering the apple, which is what was used as the pentacles in this deck, to this bird, and basically having to be patient for waiting for it to accept. I can't help but over and over as I think about this card, thinking about the story of the tortoise and the hare.
Mm.
And someone even brought it up again today in a video that I watched. And, this idea of, if for those who are watching that may not be familiar with it, the tortoise and the hare were having a race, and the hare assumed that they would win because they're faster than the tortoise. And so they took a nap while the tortoise continued on their way, and the tortoise eventually won. So, and that idea just keeps running through my head, because it's not just this stationary person, but it's someone who is steadfast, someone who is competent and doing the work to get through the process. One of the things that's interesting as I look at the courts is that we often see certain words come up for multiple court cards, in some cases all of them, because they're all related to the same element. Like, for example, steadfast, stability, consistency. Those are also terms that we applied to the King of Pentacles when we talked about it.
Mm.
But then there are things that are a little different, like this idea of conservatism, of pragmatism, being practical. There's less focus on the financial, I think, in terms of the Knight of Pentacles than, say, the King of Pentacles, because the Knight is the doer, right? They're actually doing the work to get to that point of having the wealth that the king has, basically, at least in my mind.
Yeah.
There is a routine or a kind of utility to this particular card that some might find boring. I know that I want to just get things done. I'm totally that Knight of Swords or Wands.
Yeah, well, it can also be like, it can almost be a relief sometimes. I feel like I pull it sometimes and I'm like, I might not necessarily want to pull it, but when I do, it's like, okay, like we're, we don't have to always move fast. I think that is an interesting thing with you mentioned money, right? Is I have a very anti-capitalist take on literally everything. And so when I read the Pentacles, right, I understand why money comes in, but I also think there's a way of looking at it that's actually very like anti progress, growth, like always. So the tortoise and the hare, right? It's like the outcome might not be obvious all the time. Like it's not like showing greater and greater gains. It's actually the Knight is like, no, like we don't want to burn out, right? We want to work at a pace that's sustainable for our bodies, and like Pentacles bring in the body as well. So I think that's an interesting, like it can go kind of either way there. Right. And when I pull it, it's often like, okay, you don't have to like make all the money right now. You don't have to like freak out. You should actually pay attention. It's materialism for me. I like that, Jennifer. You don't have to like be rushing towards the goal so hard that you fall apart. It's like, how do you pay attention to where you are in the present moment?
Absolutely. I guess it comes down to whether or not you view the page as stick in the mud, or whether being down to earth. And I think some of that comes from whether you're looking at it in a positive manner or at the shadow side. Now, while I don't shuffle for reversals, I do always consider both sides of the card when I'm looking at a spread. And so I like to talk about those shadow side, those reversal keywords, as it were. And there's actually, with like a lot of cards, there are alternate ways to look at it, according to most of the writers that I've read. One of those being that they could be stubborn or lazy, or lack motivation. Things could be stagnant, not moving at all, versus going slow and steady to not actually doing anything. Slowness in a negative way, like you really should be acting.
Stuck. If you're stuck, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't use the word lazy, but I do use the word stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. Then Wynn uses the word inertia, and it got me to thinking about this idea of, sometimes we just keep going because we've been going, and we actually need to stop. We need to not just be pushed along by everything is the way that it's always been, but we need to actually stop, reflect. Sometimes the Page of Pentacles is saying, yeah, you do need to pause, slow and steady wins the
Yeah,
race.
I was thinking actually of this book that came out not too long ago called Rest is Resistance. It's by Trisha Hersey, who's the NAP minister, and has this whole like resistance movement of particularly like black and brown folks, whose labor has been exploited, of saying like, no, I'm just going to rest, like I'm going to nap, I'm going to make napping a radical act. I think that's really like cool movement. Hi Joe, we got a new person.
Yes, just popped in. And alternately, though, there is this idea that in the reverse, or on the shadow side, that this night becomes more like the other nights. They're a workaholic. They're overdoing it. They're rushing through things. They're careless. And in relationship to money, sometimes the shadow side of this card is about gambling or unemployment. Instead of actually being a hard worker, you're not working at all, so to speak. So,
good. Joe notes, that's a great reference. Yeah, Audre Lorde, definitely. And I'm pretty sure the Nap Ministry is very inspired by like Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks and some of these other folks earlier on as well. So yeah, that is definitely part of an ongoing movement. It's not a new thing, but thanks for the reference.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I've done, the hard thing about having long hair is it gets in places that you don't want it. It's usually in a ponytail, but I washed it this morning. I'm actually thinking about doing something drastically different with my hair, but I haven't decided yet. So
that's exciting. I literally just chopped mine off a few days ago. I was like, I was done with, just went boop, boop, boop. So
yeah. So let's look a little bit at what I did. So with my court cards, I chose not to rename them. Instead, I'm using archetypal names on them and then a symbol for their traditional correspondence. So let's look at what the first card that I created. Thinking about the Knight of Pentacles, I called it the Architect, and as you can see with the Knights, I'm using shields to represent the Knights. I started to use like chess pieces, like use the Knight chess piece, but then I decided not to go that direction. And so I decided on the Architect because this is a person who is really contemplating planning, doing the figuring out what's necessary and how to make things work rather than actually actively doing the thing. And I intentionally chose a landscape architect because of that connection with Earth. And so if you look very closely, the blueprint is actually a landscape draft. It's not a blueprint of a building or anything like that. This is actually the garden from the Nine of Pentacles. So the Knight here planning that garden, which the woman will be in later at some point. And I began working on it, and I was like, well, maybe I'll go this way, maybe I won't. And I started looking at it with my other courts that I had already created. And here is our page, our queen, and our king. And the thing that struck me was the sky was different. And so I've gone back through, and all of my pentacles now have this sky, which is the that blue and yellow, which kind of gives it this kind of green feel, that earthy feel. And I even did this in the minors as well that were outside. So now all of my suits have a different sky depending on what card, what suit they are.
That's nice for recognizing them too, especially since with the symbols, if somebody doesn't necessarily even have to remember the symbol. That's
right. Yeah. So on the pages, I used a envelope for the messengers, and then the queen has a tiara and the king a crown that are different. So this is what that little family looks like now. But this morning I had another thought. And that was that idea of the tortoise and the hare that keeps coming up. And because I had put the bull and the goat in the king and queen, I thought, well, why not? Let's just add. Let's just put the tortoise in there with them. What do you guys think with the tortoise? I don't know. I just like that idea of drawing in that slow and steady and kind of hinting at that story because it keeps popping up in my brain when I think about this card.
I like it's kind of small, although granted that is on my, so I don't know. Holding it might be.
What's that?
Oh, just I like the idea of the tortoise a lot. It feels kind of small, like in terms of noticing that it's a tortoise, but or holding the card in my hand, it might feel different.
Yeah, he might could be slightly larger, but the thing about it is tortoises grow, right? So they can be all different sizes. And when I'm thinking tortoise, I'm thinking like I was thinking about ones that we would find growing up, right? In the fields or on the road. It wasn't thinking of a Galapagos
That's fair.
island tortoise that was like huge or anything. But yeah, he probably could be a little larger. And so this is actually the third court family that I have finished, that finished now. And next week, I will be with Jason from Tarot by the Pines to do another card. And that card's going to finish one of the major sections of the tarot because it just worked out that I have 5 cards left. And there's one from each suit and a major arcana left. And as I get closer, I'm editing the cards more and more. In fact, I have edited 7 of them yesterday. So the aces, the devil, and the tower no longer look like what people remember them as. Just trying to make everything more cohesive and flow and that type of thing. And I have like 6 more already in mind this morning looking at them that I want to update. So we need to draw a card for Jason next week, one of these 5. Right. And why don't you talk a little bit about what you have going on, what you're offering people, and what you want them to know. And then you can pick a number between 1 and 5 when you're done.
All right, cool. Yeah. So, what I've got coming up, I'm actually working in March. I'm going to have a workshop. I have not totally decided what the workshop will be, however, but I'm going between a few different options. I like to do pop-ups each month. So actually the best thing to do is folks can sign up for my newsletter. I know that we've already got a link in the description to my general website, and it'll pop up there. You can sign up to the newsletter. I do a lot of different things, particularly focusing on neurodivergent and nerdy folks. That's my sort of niche. So I've got all sorts of tarot, astrology, human design offerings. Going to be doing a workshop that'll be announced probably in the next week or so. And then in general, I'm really excited about doing human design readings, which is a modality not everyone is familiar with. That's really good for if you're trying to figure out kind of your energy flow, what's good for you, what works for you. So kind of in line with some of what we've been talking about as well. So you can check all of that out at my website. But yeah, let's see. So pick a number 1 to 5. Is that what we're going for?
It is.
Let's do
the puppy's getting restless.
Oh, okay.
I'm making sure he's not marking anything.
Probably best, especially since all your tarot decks are back there.
All right, 2. So the first suit that I'm going to finish in the deck is water. We're going to be doing the 4 of Cups next week with Jason from Tarot by the Pines. I do want to go ahead and let everybody know who our guests are for the rest of March, because I want you to.
I like that I picked water, by the way, because I am a Cancer. Yes. Cancer Pisces is appropriate.
Right, absolutely. So next week is Jason from Tarot by the Pines, and then on the 12th we have Kate Murrah from Group Tarot. And on the 19th, Maria Alves Hernando from the Sibyllis Tarot and the World Divination Association will be here. And then we're going to end the month with Marieke Lexman, who wrote the Madigan Chronicles, or is still writing them. There's 6 books and she's on book 4. And I'm looking forward to having all of them here. I met all 3 of those ladies at events this past year between Northwest Tarot Symposium and StarCon, which is also how we finally got to meet in person. Even though we've known each other for longer online, we're both part of the Mutus Liber Discord. So if anybody wants information on that Discord, which Benabel started a while back, let me know and I will get that to you guys. I will also be placing the link, which we shared in the chat, in the description box as soon as we are done today. The last thing I'd like to say is that I am looking for people who would like to volunteer to give things a once over before I print it, because I feel like that's a good practice, right? Second set of eyes. Kate Murrah actually found errors in 2 cards when I was flipping through them with her at StarCon, and that I thought those cards were done. And so I think I'm going to put them in a Dropbox, and anyone who is willing and able, just message me through any of the means in the link in the description box below and let me know. And I'll send you a link to the Dropbox so you can once over them and let me know if you find any glaring errors in them, because I'm ready to get it done. Let's make it happen.
Former copy editor, though, I appreciate that you have the awareness to be like, some folks should take a look. It's good.
Yes,
I make errors. I was an editor. I make errors all the time. So.
Yes. I edited my college newspaper, but when I'm doing stuff for myself like this, I want to get it done, finish it, be done, rush right through it. I'm probably more this card than this card. Right. And so before I put it out there for anybody else to get, I want to make sure that we don't have any glaring omissions or additions. Thank you so much for being here, Avory.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet folks in the chat that I have not encountered before, and hope everybody has a good rest of their weekend.
Yes. Until next time, everybody, good journeys.